Hello, Geneva, and welcome to Geneva Works. I'm your host, Kevin Starr. Geneva Police Department has to be ready for any type of situation, and that includes dealing with people with mental illness. Today, joined by Officer Mark Russo, we're talking about the Police Department's Crisis Intervention Team and the work they're doing in the community.
The Crisis Intervention Team is a group of specially trained law enforcement officers who are trained to assess and recognize subjects in the community who are experiencing symptoms and signs of their mental illness and/or behavioral disabilities. Law enforcement officers, to become CIT, or Crisis Intervention Team officers, they have to go through 40 hours of specialized training. In that specialized training, this is taught by a group of mental health professionals, doctors, licensed clinical social workers that tell law enforcement officers the various illnesses such as bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, autism, and the signs and symptoms to look for, what things that these subjects will experience when they're in crisis. Also, doctors and professionals, they will tell us on how to have knowledge of medications and possible side effects. So when an officer goes to a given situation, they have a better working knowledge of it. There is also intense specialized scenario training where it's a real live feed of a specific scenario where it would be somebody with autism, schizophrenia, and the subjects that are the ones who are brought in to help the officers deal with these situations are actually people who suffer from mental illness, but they are people who have recovered and are in a level of recovery more so than somebody who's in crisis. But it gives a very real life perspective. Yes, there are certain ways for the individuals to recognize that. The officer who is a CIT trained officer will be wearing a pin. I am wearing mine currently on my left front pocket. Now, that officer, whoever is CIT trained, will have that pin. Also, an officer will identify themselves to the person who is in crisis when they have first contact with them. Now, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, a group who's a grassroots group that is geared towards helping individuals with mental illness, has actually talked a lot with their consumers about this and to ask specifically when officers are on scene if there's a CIT officer available. So they are also trained on looking for the pin and asking for a CIT trained officer. But a CIT trained officer will identify themselves to the person who's in crisis, as well as, say, family or other loved ones or the person who has called. The trends that are driving the demand for CIT officers and a law enforcement response team that are more geared towards dealing with the mentally ill has multiple factors. One of the biggest ones is that state hospitals now are being shut down. I started my career not in law enforcement, but in mental health. I worked at a state mental health hospital called Shapiro Center, which is in Kankakee, Illinois. At the time that I worked there, that hospital had over 500 patients living there. That hospital currently has just over 100 patients. So this migration has now ended up on the streets most likely, because most of the patients there haven't ended up in group homes, haven't had positive resolution to where they're working in the community. They're most likely on the streets. Therefore, a lot more interaction with law enforcement in other communities that normally were not dealing with this. The other thing, as I said, hospitals have closed down. I know, for instance, Howe Developmental Center in Tinley Park closed down, Chicago Reed. We have several hospitals closing down. Therefore, The mentally ill are not getting the services that they once did. They are not receiving the medications that they normally did like they were in the hospital. So this is going to drive that level of interaction for law enforcement and for communities. Yes, the Geneva Police Department currently has 15 crisis intervention team officers. That number will be going up as well. It's our goal. It was our goal initially to have one CIT officer available per shift. We have already gone above and beyond that. And it is our goal to provide the community of Geneva and the Tri-City community to have a CIT officer available at all times. Because this is not just for Geneva, but this also acts for all of the Tri-Cities and the surrounding communities in the event that a crisis intervention team officer is not available for another municipality or even in Kane County. The CIT officers do not replace a clinically trained mental health professional. The goal of a CIT officer's response is to provide an immediate response to the crisis and act as a conduit to get the person in crisis the necessary help at that time. That individual will still need to follow up with a trained mental health professional. There are a lot of things that in our current program as the mental health liaison officer that I'm working to foster of partnering up with other community organizations like Tri-City Family Services, National Alliance on Mental Illness, all these groups that have on staff mental health professionals to further assist and aid subjects in the community. So we will never replace them, but we will act in partnership and as a conduit. More information can be found on the homepage for the City of Geneva at www.geneva.il.us. Also, if somebody is seeking more specialized focus on the mental health services, you can check my email at mrusso, R-U-S-S-O, .geneva.il.us. Also, walk-ups are always available at the Geneva Police Department, which is located at 20 Police Plaza, Geneva, Illinois, 60134, or by telephone 630-232-4736.